Welcome to Application Migration for Windows 2003 End of Support. My name is Pete Zerker. I'm a Managing Principal Consultant for InFront Consulting Group here in North America. The challenge I'm here to visit with you about today is one faced by many enterprises today. Extended support for Windows Server 2003 is coming up in July of 2015. Many large enterprises still have lots of legacy applications running on the 2003 platform, which means they have about 18 months to plan and execute their migration. Now, fortunately, at InFront, our experts believe we can reduce your migration risk, help you meet your deadlines, and make Windows Server 2003 end of support a non-event for the business. And today I'm going to show you how. The solution is a combination of native Microsoft deployment technologies, including Microsoft Application Virtualization, or Server Appt0. We'll talk about the Microsoft Web Deploy tool, better known as Web Deploy, and a third-party solution recently in a press release named as a go-to tool by Microsoft called AppZero. And of course, in terms of deployment targets, we have Windows Server 2012 R2 Hyper-V, a huge step forward for Microsoft in the hypervisor in our data center, and Windows Azure. So in those situations where maybe we don't have the hardware to support the uplift to a new operating system for the migration effort, Windows Azure is a great and ready source of capacity. In fact, for purposes of our demo here today, I have a Windows Server 2012 R2 virtual machine in Windows Azure here in my portal already deployed. Using the site-to-site VPN capability of Windows Azure, along with the great self-service capabilities of System Center, I can actually deploy virtual machines into Azure that are automatically joined to my domain quickly and easily. So just to support our discussion here today, I'll go ahead and through the System Center 2012 Service Manager self-service portal, I'll go ahead and provision a virtual machine in Windows Azure. The whole process, quick and easy for me as an end user, takes only about 10 minutes time in Windows Azure, and the joining to the domain is an automatic process. So within a few seconds of the time that virtual machine is provisioned, it's going to be joined into my Contoso domain, at which point I can access that virtual machine through my remote desktop manager just as though it's on premise. In fact, today we'll be working with a Windows 2003 legacy system running Postgresql. And I'm going to move this application from Windows Server 2003 over to a modern version of Windows, and then we're going to take that a step further and move that application out of our data center and into Windows Azure, all in just a couple of quick steps. So let's go ahead and just provision that virtual machine in Azure. I'm going to capture a virtual machine name, my VM size, what kind of virtual machine I'd like to provision. And you're going to see that this is all quite a user-friendly experience. So I don't have to know a lot about virtual machine provisioning to provision a VM here. I can simply select from the simple menus. I'll pick my VM size. I am going to join to the domain. And I can even set an expiration date here. So great lifecycle management at the end of the process here. So I'll go ahead and hit the next button here. This virtual machine will provision in the background while we're visiting, and I'll have a couple of virtual machines available to me as we are discussing our Windows Server 2003 end of life challenge. So request is on the way. I'll have another VM in Azure in just a bit. But our goal today is to talk through these options. I want to demo this solution for you end to end so you can see really how quick and easy it is to migrate even significant line of business applications, I'm going to move a database with you today. And I want to invite you to follow up with us after the session to talk about how we might help you navigate towards your best option. Our agenda today is going to be about 30 to 40 minutes all told. We'll talk about the 2003 challenge. We'll look at some of our application migration options in greater depth. And I'm going to show you hands-on how we can accelerate that application migration process. And InFront is an organization, if you're not familiar with us, are experts in data center efficiency. We specialize in working with large organizations in the US, in Asia, and in Europe, and have experienced cloud and data center architects on 3 continents, winner of multiple Microsoft awards, authors, speakers, with clients that no doubt you'll recognize. But let's get back to our subject at hand here. So in today's data center, everyone is virtualized to a large degree. It's normal for us to see organizations virtualized even 70–80% these days. And your virtualization works fine, but the bill is not getting smaller. And the storage attached to that, that bill's not getting smaller either. With Windows Server 2003 end of support coming, this looks a lot like a problem we had on the desktop side with Windows XP and Windows 7, where end of support was a challenge we met there in large numbers as well. Security needs, no doubt, increasing. Patch activity is an ongoing challenge that never goes away in the data center. Incidentally, for orchestrated patch efforts, InFront has some intellectual property here to help in that case. So we'd love to talk to you about that solution if cluster patching or hypervisor patching is one of those items on your to-do list. But let's talk about some of our options for migrating these applications. We're going to look today at three technologies. We'll begin with a couple of native Microsoft capabilities. We're going to talk about Microsoft Application Virtualization or Server Appt0. We'll talk briefly about the Microsoft Web Deployment Tool or Web Deploy, which actually has great migration capabilities. Not everybody knows that. That may be new to you, but we'll have a look at that today in the course of our discussion. And finally, I want to talk to you about AppZero, how that solution works and actually leverages some underlying Microsoft technologies, and then I'll show you that solution hands-on. Bottom line, finding the right balance of functionality, app support, and automation is going to be key to minimizing your spend in terms of licensing and manual effort in the migration process. So let's talk first about application portability. You have no doubt many line of business applications running on Windows Server 2003. Some of those might even run in a web farm. So in situations where we have widespread deployment of middleware, for example, to the application tier of our web farms, the Server Appt0 component is going to be a great solution to allow us to capture or package that application through a sequencing process, and then using System Center 2012 Virtual Machine Manager, deploy that application to multiple servers quickly and easily. It's even going to support a scale out capability there. So for those lighter weight middleware type applications, Server Appt0 is going to be a great fit. Certainly not a solution that we would use for migrating for deploying enterprise databases. It's not supported for tier 1 apps like Exchange and SharePoint, but definitely one of those tools in our tool belt to ease the deployment process and to increase automation, reduce manual effort. But what about those web applications that we have deployed on the 2003 platform? One of the challenges with Server Appt0 is it does, generally speaking, require an installer. Many times we're going to have legacy applications that were deployed long ago, and the talent who was in-house to write and deploy that application have long since gone. And that's where the Web Deploy tool is going to help us out. Many people think of the Web Deploy tool as just that, as a deployment tool, but it actually has great migration capability. So for IS sites and servers, we can actually migrate individual web sites or entire web servers. But that IS6 to IS7 migration is a sweet spot for web deploy. I can pick up the web applications on a Windows Server 2003 system. I can move it over to a modern version of Windows using web deploy installed on both my source legacy system and on my target. I'm using web deploy 3.5 in my environment. I can even use web deploy to retrieve a list of IIS dependencies. It's very important that the roles and features installed in our legacy environment have their equivalents installed on our modern version of Windows, on Windows Server 2012. But the bottom line is web deploy is going to be a great and free solution for moving IIS applications at the lower end of the complexity scale. And I say at the lower end of the complexity scale because there's still a certain amount of heavy lifting that we have to do. For example, we need to retrieve that list of IIS dependencies. We need to make sure that we have a match in terms of roles and features on source and target. Web deploy is going to be great for moving the IIS components. It's not, though, going to install and configure other platform components like our specific versions of .NET. It's not going to help us migrate custom Windows services or scheduled tasks. And at the end of the day, it's a command line process. It's not going to be the most user-friendly tool for the IT pro. Certainly many IT pros can work from the command line comfortably and leverage web deploy for some of those less complex migrations. But everybody also longs for a user-friendly experience to minimize our manual effort and maximize the automation in the process. And that's where I want to talk to you about AppZero. So let's get right down to the million-dollar question here. What is AppZero? So AppZero is an agentless migration technology. We can move applications with AppZero from those legacy versions of Windows we talked about, from Windows 2003, 2003 R2. We can move applications easily between 32-bit versions of legacy operating systems to 64-bit versions of our modern versions of Windows 2008, 2008 R2, all the way up to our 2012 platform. What AppZero will do when running on the target machine, it will discover the applications running on our legacy source system. I don't install anything on that legacy source system. It's going to extract that information and present it to me in the AppZero console on my target system. I can then choose which applications I'd like to migrate. I can copy and run those applications in a virtual application appliance. In fact, that's what you're looking at right here. This is my virtual application appliance. This will allow me to run the application, test it, make sure I'm comfortable that it's working as I expect, at which point I can dissolve that virtual appliance and the application is installed locally on the system. So very important point there. This is not application virtualization. That app is installed locally on the operating system when we're done with this process. And the source operating system doesn't need to match the OS level on the destination. So by design, I can move apps from my legacy 2003 R2 platform over to the modern versions of Windows 2008 and 2012. And in fact, I'll do just that with you today. And when we're done, we have a locally running application minus that virtual appliance. But again, just to summarize the capabilities here, AppZero from an architecture perspective is an agentless technology. We're going to install the AppZero component on our target Windows Server 2008 or 2012 system. It's licensed per server for unlimited migrations, and it supports, and this is perhaps the most important part, it supports migration of a very wide variety of applications, including databases like Postgresql, like we're doing today, SQL Server, SQL 2005, SQL 2008, a wide variety of enterprise application platforms, WebSphere, Apache, web-based apps, .NET apps like we just talked about, multi-tier applications. I remember my first AppZero migration I witnessed. My demonstrator if you will, actually migrated both a WordPress instance and the associated copy of MySQL right along with it over to a new system quickly and easily. But AppZero works without agents, without installers, or the developers who wrote those applications that we need to migrate. The good candidates, as I mentioned, are going to be pretty widespread. Third-party packaged apps, Java middleware, J2E, open source apps are fully supported, PHP, Python, and a variety of database and desktop applications. So the list of what you can't move with AppZero, I think, tends to be a shorter discussion than the discussion about what you can move. But let's get over into our demonstration and have a look at AppZero in action. So incidentally, that virtual machine that I provisioned using my System Center 2012 self-service portal with Service Manager is now up and running. There we go. It's joined into my Contoso domain, so I now have a target where I can install AppZero. So I'll just flip over to my console here. I'm going to log into my virtual machine. I'm going to log in as the domain administrator here. Certainly I want to be logged in as a user with local administrator rights at the very least. So normal software installation type permissions. Do a quick who am I here to make sure I know who I am in terms of my logged on user. And I am logged on as the Contoso administrator. Just going to zoom in there and make sure. Yep, we're good to go. So at this point, I'm ready to install AppZero. I'm going to do just a quick start of the installer here. It's really a click next type installation, so nothing for you to sort out really. You have the universal installer and you'll have your AppZero license key. So we'll run the installation. I'll copy my license information into the installer and we'll be done rather quickly. Now you'll notice here that it mentions we have to install the .NET framework. It's even going to take care of that dependency for me. I paste in my license information, off I go. AppZero is at that point installed and running, and that's going to be about the first 5 minutes. So I already have AppZero installed on another virtual machine here in Windows Azure. And I also have a Windows Server 2008 R2 system on premise, so here in my data center, where I can migrate and do some testing before I take applications up to the cloud. So I just want to show you some of the flexibility there in terms of migrating. Again, our target application on this Windows Server 2003 Enterprise system is Postgresql. So pretty standard open source database platform. I have my Postgres database and a couple of application databases there right now. So let's go ahead and walk through the migration process. So on my target system, I have AppZero installed. I'm going to launch my Tether console. So our first step is going to be to create a virtual appliance. I'm going to call this Postgresql. And I have to give AppZero the name of my source system. So it's actually creating that virtual appliance for me on the fly right now. I'm going to give it the name of my source system, where the application is I would like to migrate. And I'm going to tell AppZero to go ahead and find those applications. It's going to authenticate to that remote system. Incidentally, I'm not only migrating an application from a Windows Server 2003 32-bit system over to 64-bit. That's a Windows 2003 system in a work group. So a very sort of worst case scenario that we would see in our enterprise environment. So within a couple of minutes of hitting the Find Applications button, I'm going to have a list of remote applications present on my source system, the Windows 2003 server running Postgresql. Now, I'll scroll down here and I'll find my Postgres service, I'm actually going to grab pgadmin. I'm going to grab the administrative console that we use to administer a Postgresql database. Now, AppZero is going to take care of more than just the application. It's going to have a look at the services with me. And you'll notice when we flip over to the Remote Services tab that it's going to tell me we have a user running that service that is not local system, which means we're going to need to move a user account over. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the password of that user account even. And what AppZero will do when it moves that user over is automatically move it over with a known password in the AppZero documentation. So I already know what that password is going to be. I can change that on the target system when I'm all said and done. And I'll flip over to remote accounts. I see that my IPS Jarvis user that's running that database is going to be moved over for me automatically. So at that point, I'm in good shape to go ahead and begin the tethering process. So we're going to now start this virtual appliance. I'm going to launch the application and work that application out, so to speak. I'm going to use the application on my target system in the virtual appliance here to make sure that we have a functional application. I'll go ahead and click the Launch Application button. It's going to retrieve my appliance. It's going to launch an AppZero command prompt in the context of that system. So with the virtual application appliance running, I can look at my Windows services and make sure that the PostgreSql service is actually running here on my source system. It's not installed yet. It's running in the context of that virtual appliance. But if we have a look here, we'll see my Postgres database server service. And when we go ahead and start that service, it's going to run in the context of the IPS Jarvis user that's migrated automatically by AppZero. So at this point, though, I'm still in that virtual appliance, but my database appliance is running. So within this prompt, I can now look at the file system as it exists in this virtual appliance. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and launch the admin tool for administering this database. So I'll go ahead and get over into that directory. There's my pgadmin executable. This is going to launch my PostgreSql admin interface, and I'll just connect to this database within the virtual appliance and make sure that it's actually functional and running, at which point I'm going to feel pretty good about going ahead and migrating this database and database instance over to my new modern version of Windows. So I'm just going to zoom in and have a look here. So I'm now on my target Windows Server 2008 R2 system, 64-bit, in my data center. You notice that the same databases we saw on the 2003 system are in fact up and running. So here's the 2003 system by comparison. You'll notice the same databases are running, the same user account is there, etc. So we are at this point fully prepared to go ahead and migrate this application by dissolving that appliance, meaning that now the application will run locally on this system. And to do that, I simply need to tap the Tether Complete button here in the Tether console for AppZero. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So at this point, it's going to undock my virtual appliance, and I am clear to go ahead and simply dissolve that appliance and move this application over to my Windows 2008 system in the data center. I'm actually going to take it a step further, though. What I'm going to do is take that virtual appliance and I'm just going to copy it over to a Windows Server 2012 R2 system in my data center where I have a copy of AppZero installed. And before I do that, I'm actually going to go ahead and compress that copy of the the virtual application appliance before I copy it over to Windows Azure, just to accelerate my my copy process. I'll just use a simple command line install. As you can imagine, this is a process that's very easily automated with AppZero scripting, or with an orchestration platform like System Center 2012 R2 Orchestrator, just as an example. So let me go ahead and pull up the command prompt, and we'll get this application up and running in our Azure VM. So the only thing AppZero doesn't do for me is help me spell the virtual machine name right. So I do have to tell AppZero what I want, not just what I'm thinking. So there I go. I have my command prompt open on, or the C$ share open on my Azure virtual machine. I'm going to copy the compressed version of that appliance over to my Windows Server 2012 R2 system running in Windows Azure. I'll have that compressed copy of the appliance over there in just a moment. So we'll come back here in just a couple of minutes, and we'll complete the migration process. So within a couple of minutes, I'll have a copy of that virtual appliance, the compressed version, over here in my appliances folder on my target Server 2012 system running in Windows Azure. And you'll see here I have the compressed appliance. So what I'm going to do is simply right-click this appliance. I'm going to uncompress it and dock that virtual application appliance here on my Azure VM. At which point I've already worked, given this application a workout on my staging system over there in my data center on my Windows Server 2008 system. So I know that the application in this virtual appliance is ready to go. So I'm simply going to dock this. I'm not even going to dock this appliance. I'm going to go ahead and dissolve this appliance and take care of that migration process. So at this point, I already have an application that's ready for me to run. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the AppZero command line, and I'm going to use the command line syntax for dissolving this application, this virtual appliance. So basically, I'm going to take that Postgresql application and install it locally here by dissolving the virtual appliance. I need simply run the command line and provide the name of the appliance that I need to dissolve. So you see my appliance name there. The undocked version is Postgresql. I provided the AppZ dissolve command line, the name of the appliance, and within just a couple of moments, it's going to dissolve the virtual appliance, install the application locally on Windows Azure. So now when I look at my Services Manager to see what I have installed here, I should see a copy of the Postgresql Windows service running as that IPS_Jarvis user that AppZero migrated for me, in fact. So I'll just scroll down to the P's. There I see that service, and I'll scroll over to see if that service is already running, and in fact it's there, it's running. My application at this point is ready to go. If I go to my local file system, I can see now what applications are installed. So locally on the file system here, notice that you'll see both my Postgresql and my pgadmin, my admin interface for administering my database. So it's all installed locally here. But let's go ahead and drill down and just, proof is in the pudding, let's launch our Postgresql admin interface and have a look at those databases to make sure that we have databases online and running here in Windows Azure. So again, on my source appliance in Windows Server 2003, you'll remember I had 3 databases here, only one of them is running, and my IPS_Jarvis user is my administrator on that system. So I'm going to switch back over to my Windows Azure version here. I'll connect to my Postgresql instance, expand my databases where I have those 3, and we'll just have a look, and there we are. Same applications running now in Windows Azure, all in less than 15 minutes time plus a couple of minutes for the copy. Again, much of that process can be automated as well. So quick and easy, I've now migrated an application from a legacy operating system, from a 32-bit instance of Windows Server 2003 R2 over to Windows Server 2012 R2 running in the cloud. So great capabilities, even if I don't have the hardware to support the uplift in my data center. So again, just to overview the process, we installed AppZero on our target system. Quick install, I created that virtual appliance. AppZero discovered the applications running on my legacy source, extracted that information, the application, the users, the services. We exercised that application in the AppZero virtual application appliance that you see here. Made sure that our application was functional. Once we were functional, we moved that up to our Azure VM, dissolved the virtual appliance, and so now PostgreSQL in this case is running on the target system. And that's just one example of moving an application from a legacy operating system quickly and easily over to a modern version of Windows using AppZero. So let's talk about your next steps. We'd really love for you to get a head start with InFront Accelerate, our Windows 2003 migration offering. We can come talk to your folks, talk about the applications and the situation that you're facing in your data center, and help you plan the best path forward. And through that process of expert-led planning and migration testing, we're going to help you build an internal skill set to do the migrating on your own, if that's what you'd like to do. So definitely feel free to reach out to Steve at InFrontConsulting.com, and let's talk about the next steps to get you on the road to Windows Server 2003 retirement. Again, thanks for joining us for application migration for Windows 2003 end of support. Thanks for your time.